The air was thick with the scent of burning resin and iron. Fire smoldered in the great pits outside the temple, and the war priests moved through the halls, tracing symbols on the warriors' foreheads with blackened ash. The drums had not stopped in 3 days, their relentless rhythm echoing through the city, a heartbeat of impending war. He stood on the balcony of his great dwelling, overlooking the gathered ranks below. Warriors draped in hide and metal, their weapons humming with an old power, their bodies painted with the sigils of their clans. He gripped the rail. The sky above was dark, the heavy clouds pulsing with distant flashes of light. Below, the city buzzed with restless energy, its people moving like shadows between the firelit streets, their faces set with grim determination. A voice spoke from behind him. "You must not go." He did not turn. He knew who it was. The seer, draped in the ceremonial robes of the old watch, stood just within the doorway. Her voice carried the weight of a dozen prophecies spoken and fulfilled. "I have heard your words before," he said, voice steady, "and I have dismissed them before." The seer stepped forward, the torches cast flickering shadows against her weathered face. "Then hear them once more. If you go to war, you will not return. The unseen has spoken." He let out a breath, long and slow, and turned to face her. "Your omens have failed me before." The seer's gaze did not waver. "You live now because the unseen has willed it. But your fate is sealed. If you step onto the field, no power of yours will bring you home." Silence stretched between them. The distant wail of the war horns rolled across the city. The fires outside the temple burned brighter, their glow licking the stone walls as if in anticipation. Finally, he smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Then I will not step onto the field." The war party rode at dawn, the first light glinting off the layered plates of their armor. The king moved among them, offering words of strength and fire, but his robes were those of a common rider. The markings of his rank were absent. His helm bore no crest. The king was nameless in the ranks. He was no fool. If the unseen had marked his life for the taking, then he would not offer himself freely. He would slip through the cracks of fate, unseen and untouched. They rode hard through the valley, their advance swallowed by the shifting haze that clung to the land like mist. The world felt heavy, thick with the weight of something unseen. The air buzzed with unseen energy, a presence lingering just beyond the senses. The first clash came before the sun had fully risen. The air split with the sound of war, the screams of the dying, the crackling energy of weapons wielded by those desperate to carve their names into history. The king moved as he always had, cutting through his enemies with precision, his every motion effortless, each strike an echo of the battles that had come before. The fight stretched across the hours, the tide shifting like sand in a storm. The air was thick with the scent of burning flesh and scorched earth. The enemy lines faltered, wavered, broke. The battle was turning and victory loomed. And then from the ridgeline, a single shot rang out. It was not meant for anyone. A stray shot sent out into the fray, unlooked for and unseen. It found its mark just beneath the seams of his armor, where the plates did not quite meet. The impact was silent, like a whisper. For a moment, he did not move. The world around him carried on, the clash of battle undiminished, the roar of warriors pressing forward, unaware that something had shifted. Then his grip faltered, his vision swayed, and his body grew heavy. He staggered, his breath caught, his limbs numb. The battle raged around him, but it no longer mattered. The unseen had spoken. His men saw him falter. They moved to his side, tried to hold him upright, but the strength had already left him. He was lifted onto his mount, his vision darkening, the sky above turning to shadow. They carried him back through the valley, back through the gates of his city, back to the temple where the fire still burned. The drums that had beat so fiercely now slowed, their rhythm faltering. The war priests moved through the streets, their chants weaving through the air, a lament carried on the wind. The procession moved in solemn silence, the city watching as their leader was borne homeward. The seer stood at the gates, her face hidden in the folds of her hood, unmoving as they passed. The air seemed colder now, the fire somehow dimmer, as though even the city itself recoiled from the weight of prophecy fulfilled. They laid him in the ceremonial chamber, and the people gathered in silence, watching as their king was prepared for the rites of passing. His armor, bloodied and broken, was removed piece by piece. The sigils on his skin, once bold with war paint, had faded beneath the stain of battle. The wind howled through the high corridors, carrying the scent of smoke and the whispers of the gathered priests. Their voices rose in a final chant, the words ancient and heavy spoken for all who had fallen before him. And when they washed the blood from the stones, the birds came, circling above, dark shapes against the twilight sky. They lingered, waiting, their forms shifting in the fading light, drawn by the scent of what had been left behind.